the Savior of my soul. Jesus, my Jesus, is the Savior of my soul. Is the Savior of my soul. Jesus, 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 my Jesus is the Savior of my soul. Is the Savior of my soul. God bless you. Okay, so we are here again for the same purpose as always, to worship God, and as a bonus, to fellowship with the brethren. Right? So in worshiping God, we show that we love Him, and by being here together among brethren, show that we love each other. Right? Amen. So, by having love for God and love for man, what are we keeping in essence? Commandments. The 10 Commandments. Let us pray. Dear loving Lord, judge in heaven, we give you thanks for this new day, but not just any day, but your holy Sabbath day. Thank you that your providence allowed for us to be here safely. Be those who are also on their way, be those who will be worshipping from home. Let us hedge the Sabbath with complete solemnity, dear Lord. Help us to be reverent. Forgive us of our sins. Thank you for the week that is culminating now. Please with me as I share your word. I pray to be a blessing to somebody that you will learn today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so somebody please remind me who we looked at last week. Who did we look at last week? Joshua and who? Caleb. And what did we learn from them? To not be what? To not be influence. Alright? Alright, so we continue this morning looking at the Israelites. And I'm starting from the final charge given to them from Joshua before he died. Before we continue to this week's theme. Alright, so we're going to read how much Joshua implored, beseeched, and even begged the Israelites to fear God. So before he died, he practically was begging the Israelites to fear God. Who can tell me how old Joshua was when he died?
110.
110 years old. Thank you. That's impressive. So Joshua was 110 years old when he died. So he would have been around from the Israelites left Egypt straight up to when they entered Canaan, the promised land. The Bible first introduced Joshua in Exodus 24. Does anybody remember under what circumstance Joshua was introduced? Remember what happened when Joshua just came on the scene? When they went to spy? No. Not when they went to spy. Anybody else?
No, God had instructed Moses to. Oh no, sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong person.
Yeah. What are you saying? Alright, so the first instance where Joshua was announced was when he and Moses went up to the Mount of God. And when they were coming back, Joshua said, "Hear a sound of war." But when they came inside, it was actually a golden calf they were worshiping. Remember that from week 1?
Yeah.
Alright, so we know them worshiping the golden calf wasn't the first or the last instance of trouble the Israelites were going on with. Alright, so Joshua knew exactly what kind of people he was talking to. That's why he had to be pleading with the people for so long before he died. This reminds me of a similar statement Ellen White made in manuscript February 24, 1915, and I'll read it. It says that, I tell you now that when I am laid to rest, great changes will take place. I want the people to know that I warned them fully before my death. Similar, Ellen White and Joshua, similar, warning the people before they died. Alright, so let's turn to Joshua 24 as we read of how he pleads with the Israelites. Joshua 24, I'm going to read verses 14 to 27. Joshua 24, verses 14 to 27. If you are there, you can begin to read it. Yeah. Joshua 24, verses 14 to 27.
Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood, and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood are the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Alright, pause there. I want somebody else to start. Thank you. I want somebody else to start from verse 16.
And the people answered and said, God forbid that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For the Lord our God, He it is that brought us up and our father out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, and which did those great things for our sight, and preserves us in all thy way, where we went among all the people through whom we passed. And the Lord drave out from before us, and the people, even the Amorites, which dwell in the land. Therefore will we also serve the Lord, for He is our God. And Joshua said unto the people, Ye cannot serve the Lord, for He is an holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions, nor your sins.
Alright, thank you. Somebody from verse 20 now. Somebody else from verse 20.
If ye forsake the Lord and serve strange gods, then he will turn and do you hurt and consume you. After that he hath done you good. And the people said unto Joshua, Nay, for we will serve the Lord. And Joshua said unto the people, Ye are witnesses against yourselves, that ye have chosen you, the Lord, to serve him. And they said, We are witnesses. Now therefore, put away, said he, the strange gods which are among you, and incline your heart unto the Lord God of Israel. And the people said unto Joshua, The Lord our God will we serve, and his voice we will we obey.
Alright, thank you. I will read the last 3 verses, 25 to 27. And it says, So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and set them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and took a great stone, and set it there under an oak, that was by the center of the Lord. And Joshua said unto all the people, Behold, this stone shall be a witness unto us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord, which he spake unto us. It shall be therefore a witness unto you, lest ye deny your God. Alright, so I want to ask you one question. Knowing the Israelites, because this, as I said, it's the third week looking at Israelites. So I want to ask, do you think that Israelites kept this promise?
No.
No. No. Alright, so what I want to do is to go through the events that happened as a result of them not keeping their promise up to the topic that we'll be looking at today. So we're going to start at the root. I will read the scripture to you, and I want you to see if we can connect the dots between the Israelites and the early history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I'm going to read Judges 2, verses 10 to 12. I want you to listen carefully, and I want you to think and see if we can connect the dots between the Israelites' occasion and the history of the early history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
And after she died, they printed a book called
Christian and
Presumption.
Doctrine.
So they had visitors from some ecumenical churches and something doing that.
Alright, that in essence, yes. But let me read it. Let me read what I have here. It says, and I'm reading from two sources. They are present truth credible. You can check them out after it. They are from Truth Seeker Ministries and End Time Prophecy. Alright. It says, as our pioneers or old timers were dying off, those Sunday keeping converts that had come in became the majority over time. And as they came in, they brought in their beliefs and concepts, namely Trinitarianism. Our church would eventually be taken over and ruled by educated scholars from the Jesuit academia, namely Leroy Froom. The Seventh-day Adventist Church was seen as a cult by the rest of the world, and so Leroy Froom and others, instead of putting forth the straight truth to convince the world that we are not a cult, they changed the very foundational pillar of our church, the God we worship, to bring the Seventh-day Adventist Church more in line with the rest of the world. And what is the foundational teaching which the Church of Babylon unites on? The Trinity God. They chose a career path of theology rather than a true calling from God. And as prophesied by Ellen White in 1903, a new organization will be set up and our religion would be changed. So you see the same thing? Is it the same thing in Judges 2 verse 7? It said, all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, and arose another generation. Because the first generation who made the promise had died. Yes, sister?
And the worst part about that is that the scripture says that people are not to perish for a lot of knowledge because they reject knowledge. Right? And so that the Lord will reject them also. And you find that we didn't get it overnight, because just as there are generation who know not God because they chose not to remember God, right? Because some truth would have been preserved, God would not let this truth die down. So there were people in those days who were keeping the commandments of God, but as you know, in coming down in history, the group that choose to follow the path of unrighteousness always excel those who choose to preserve truth. And so that generation that knew not God, they chose not to know God, not because there were evidences or preachers, genuine preachers still preaching the thus saith the Lord, but they choose to hide their heart and the message because they want to follow the fashion of this world. And so today we are in that same dilemma where, many Christians now they choose to reject light, and that is how condemnation comes into the world.
Right. So true. Alright, so verse 12 said that the Israelites what? Forsook the Lord and they followed the other gods of the people around them. So now let's go to verse 14 and see what God did about that. Same Judges chapter 2, verse 14. Somebody read that for me, please.
And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he delivered them into the hands of spoilers that spoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies round about, so that they could not any longer stand before their enemies.
Alright. So God delivered them up. And we see here that this happened to the Israelites because they made the same mistake twice. Who can tell me what that mistake is that they did? They made it twice now. What's
They
this?
serve other gods.
They serve other God, but as a result of what? They got a specific instruction to not do what? To not be a mixed multitude. Right? Because they were a mixed multitude. And people rub off on them. It says that in the wilderness they traveled as a mixed multitude. Because remember that some of the Egyptians came out of Egypt with them. And because of that mixed multitude, they influenced them to what? Murmur and said they want the flesh pots and they want to go back to Egypt. Garlic and onion and all those things. On the second occasion now, when they're out of the wilderness and in the promised land, once again, they chose to dwell with the Canaanites because God said, inhabit it and spread out and drive out the people, but they didn't do that. Only one tribe did that, and that was Judah. The rest wanted to dwell with them. And as a result, they took place in their idolatrous practices. Can anyone tell me through what means modern Israelites is trying to be a mixed multitude again in these days? Through what? Through ecumenism. Thank you. Alright, so what I want to do now is.
So, before you move on, what you just mentioned a while ago with the Israelites joining up with the heathens, it is saying to me that even though we're not seeing the folks in the organizations to say that they are heathens, but because of what they are practicing, if you socialize with persons of different belief and practices, then what it is saying to me is that the same thing we are going to gradually practice, just like all the Israelites, because they intermingle with these people, they started to worship their God. So if we continue in the apostasy, then we are going to practice the same thing. We are going to neglect the health message. We are going to neglect the dress reform and all the reforms that are there. Because if you notice in the organization, those are the things that are being practiced there. The music is the same thing what the world and the other denominations are practicing. And so if we continue with them, then that's the same thing that is going to happen to us. And then we are not going to be those peculiar people where we show the distinction between God's children and the children of the enemy.
Right. Yes, Sister Shanta.
And that is why, just to add to what Mommy said, that is why whenever you find that someone is running not the Bible, because it will say by behold you become changed. And so by your associate, when you say, God is not marked for bad company, corrupt good character. And so it is the part of the enemy where we believe that, we are strong enough, even the Bible says, take heed lest we become to stand before. And in our minds, we are strong enough so we can be around these people and it does not affect us in any way. We truly believe that we are the ones who will convert them. When it is the other way around,
That's right.
they will rub off on us because bad company corrupts good character, especially with our nature where we seem to love sinful things. And so that is why it says that we should be careful lest we think we stand before. We should not place evil in our sight. We should not sit in the seat of the scornful. So whenever we think that we can stand, in darkness, that is the plan, that is the trap, the snare of the enemy for him to, get us to think that we can do all these things and do it perfectly fine. We can stand when trouble comes, we can stand even though we have been compromising.
That's right.
Right. Yes, my brother.
Question. Name Bishop. I know we don't use the name Bishop by any history, but I realize that in the school of the where they use the word clergy, and I heard another
Yeah.
So is that it? Even the speech has been changed overnight.
When I was when I was in the building and me and my wife go to church one day and they went to camp early. I know when the pastor name called the congregation stand up and represent the pastor, right? So the Sabbath afternoon they invited a pastor that they believe was from foreign. And he was like, come for it, and he said, but he said, your congregation came out and supported the Archbishop. And I think what that is. So I'm say Archbishop. I'm saying that's the first time I heard the word Archbishop in the Seventh Adventist Church. That I think that was the first time I started to say, pick up and say the change, Archbishop, the language start change and then the action and then out of there.
And it's prevalent now.
Yes. And I left it from what a year ago. Alright. Alright. Share the most recent, as Pastor said earlier this morning. We are like Israel of old wanted to be a mixed multitude. We're practicing the same. We're doing it by ecumenism again. Even, as Pastor said, the incident that happened, that's a form of ecumenism. Want to be a mixed multitude, want to invite other people in the church to pray, want to invite other denominations and the pulpit to preach. That is a form of mixed multitude as well. Alright. It's almost like we enjoy shacking up. You know when you shack up? Like common law relationship, it's almost like that. And 2 Corinthians 6 verse 14. What 2 Corinthians 6 verse 14 say about that? That kind of behavior, wanting to be a mixed multitude. Popular one. We should know that one. 2 Corinthians 6 verse 14.
Be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness?
Right. Alright, so back to the Israelites now. So as a consequence of their idolatry in verse 14, it said that God's wrath was hot against the Israelites. And we already know what kind of God is concerned in his worship, right? And what kind of God? A jealous God concerning his worship. So as punishment, right through the book of Judges, God keeps his promise to deliver them up to the hands of the spoilers. But because he cannot help but to be merciful, he raises up a prophetess, a prophet, and a judge which delivers them. The story is in Judges. We're not going to get into their account, but if you could just tell me who those people are. The main characters in Judges who deliver the people through that oppression. One is a prophetess, one is a prophet, and one is a judge. The prophetess is who? Was who? Yes. Who? Deborah, the prophetess, was the prophet. Man of war, army man. Who? Barak. More major than Barak. Man of war, lead out countless war, captive. Gideon, and the judge was who? Strong man. Samson. So these three people deliver the people from their oppression right through Judges. Alright, so all of that was between the death of Joshua up to the topic that we're looking at today. So we catch up now. We're going to go into life post-oppression. And the title for that is The Dangerous Sin of Presumption. The dangerous sin of? Presumption. Alright, so I'll be calling up the title of the slide because there's no projector. So the first title is Who Shall Rule? So we've been following the journey. Last week was Joshua and Caleb, and I hear the word rule. So we know who we're looking at. Who we're looking at? Who shall rule? Who rule? What kind of people rule? King. So which king we going to look at? The first king. King Saul. Alright? So I earlier called presumption a dangerous sin. Why did I say that? Why did I call presumption a dangerous sin? Sister White writes in her book Confrontation that the sin of presumption lies close. The sin of presumption lies close beside the virtue of perfect faith and confidence in God. Satan flattered himself that he could take advantage of the humanity of Christ to urge him over the line of trust to presumption. Upon this point, many souls are wrecked. And I can see why many souls will be wrecked. Because he said, the sin of presumption lies close behind the virtue of perfect faith. That means that the line can't easily blur. Yes, very thin. Right. Psalms 19, verse 13. You know that Psalm says, there where I will keep in my heart so that I may not sin against him. To avoid the sin of presumption, we should hide Psalms 19, verse 13 in our hearts. What does that say? Psalms 19, verse 13, that safeguard against presumption. Psalms 19, verse 13.
That thy servant also from judge with sin. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great congregation.
Psalms 1.
And is it one from Psalms 119?
Yes.
Alright. Somebody says the next one is that Psalms 119. Which verse?
Take that one.
Blessed are the undefiled, the way.
No, man, we're talking Psalms 19, verse 13. Keep that back there, servant, from presumptuous sin. Yeah. Maybe the next one in Psalms 19. Alright. Alright, so let us now get into the account of King Saul so that we may learn from his experience, because remember that all scripture is profitable for what? From week 1 we've been saying this. For doctrine, reproof, correction, and what? Instruction in righteousness. Alright. Next slide is due to popular demand. Question. Is what's popular always best?
No.
Never, well, not always, never. Most times it's not what is best. Alright, First Samuel 8 to 20. Turn there second, please. 1 Samuel 8, verse 20. There? Alright, so that verse, it straightly put that they wanted a king so they could be like other nations. They wanted to be like the people around them. It says that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. Let us read the excuse they gave for this. Let us read the excuse that they gave for this request in verse 5. It says, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. It was true that Samuel was getting old, and his sons were corrupt for real, but you know that they could have asked for another judge or another priest, but no, they specifically wanted a king so that they could be like the other nations around them. Alright. You know, I try to link the past with the future, because you know that nothing is new under the sun, and what happened already going to happen again. So, like when this was a popular demand, right? The people said, come, we want a king, we want a king. What is the popular demand in the last time for the people? What did the people go demand by popular request? Yes, we're on the ball. Sunday law.
And you know, as you touched that point, how I'm not just in the good. But I was talking to someone and they were saying that there's no way that Senegalese is just going to get up and change the day of worship, because even though they may compromise on other beliefs, that is just common here. And Senegalese won't just change the day of worship because it goes against the very thing that they stand for and do it on Sunday. And I said to the person that we can reason like that until we understand the deceitfulness of sin and the sinfulness of sin to a point where a man will see black and call it white just to suit the position that he is in, right? And that is what will happen in the last days, where persons won't be thinking of how can they please God. It's about how to preserve their lives. And when a man is back in a corner where adrenaline is flowing in the body and the only thing on their mind is to preserve their lives, it amazes you the stance that some people will take. Just like Israel of old, where by other demands they wanted a king. It was not enough that God brought them through all of their calamities, without even them yielding their weapons. They won wars, through the might of God. That was enough. That was not enough to convince them that hey, you don't need a king. Because a popular demand, they wanted to be like other nations. The same thing is going to happen. It's not about the truth that God has given us, or the great light that He has not given to any other people, right? It will be about them and what they want, right? So the same thing. It will amaze us to see how easy the day of worship will change for many people.
Right. And it also goes to say the same children of Israel. Moses didn't go on for long. He went up to God into the mountain to have a conversation with God. And it was not long. The people wanted a God. They needed a God. And they forced and they quarreled and they behaved the most weird with Aaron. We want God.
Right.
And so they were given a God.
We don't want God. They wanted Caesar. They don't want God. They wanted Caesar.
And so that is how they portray. And it is just to show, as Sister Shanta just said, how easy the change, the conversion, the whatever can happen in the mind to see. So
yeah,
yes.
and then we realize now how fast Aaron
Yes.
gave the people
Yes.
what they wanted. As the leader, he gave them what they wanted because what they asked for it. Right? So the prophet said that what they will ask for national Sunday law, guess what? The leaders already been a warp stage is going to give it to them.
Sister Smith, you have a hand up?
Yes, I'm thinking that Moses had stayed a little longer than they would have liked for him to have stayed. And Moses became afraid of the apparent rebellion that they were about to probably overthrow because they were like demanding a God that they could see.
Exactly.
So in his weakness, but I'm also saying that in the beginning when the people were delivered from Egypt, it wasn't necessarily Moses who spoke, it was Aaron, because God gave Aaron as a mouthpiece. So he more like was the one who spoke, and as a result, all the plagues came and everything, we know the whole. So he should be able to stand, but because of fear for his life, and probably it wasn't a popular thing, and he had lost faith, not seeing his Moses coming back. And so it is now that our leaders, they are being pressured. Our prime minister is also being pressured. Because, if he doesn't comply with, you understand, he may just go like, you understand? So, a lot of pressure is coming on the conference, and so they are pressuring us, not recognizing that they are our leaders, just like how Aaron was the one who was there holding up, and because God said that he'll give Aaron to be a God to Moses, that Moses is to represent God. So the chain, it fall down somewhere along the line, and all because of rebellion, or because they want to be like other nations, and so it is today that we are experiencing the dregs, so to speak,
because
of the
we
whole.
want to be seen in the eyes of men.
Yes,
or
not to be
we
queer.
Stand
Yes.
and how we can follow their laws.
We don't want to be single or straight laced or anything. We want to be merged,
And I find Samuel,
That's right.
and I find Samuel being a stronger priest than Aaron because, all after the people pressuring him and say, want a king, want a king. Say Samuel do the nothing until him talk to God. Every move we make him ask God to warn them as to what kind of king they're going to get as a consequence. Let us read about it. Verse is 11 to 19. Read up, please. Same 1 Samuel 8. Verses 11 to 19.
And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself and for his chariots and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed, and of your vineyards, and give to his officers, and to his servants. And he will take your men servants, and your maid servants, and your goodliest young men, and your asses, and put them to his work. And he will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And he shall cry out in that day because of your king, which he shall have chosen you. And the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refuse to obey the voice of Samuel, and they say, Nay, but we will have a king over us.
Alright. All of those consequences, look here, if you get the king, all of these things go happen to you. And the end of it, them said, Nay, we are sure, we want the king the same way. And once again, because we're thinking this morning, I want to ask an next question. We're going to link this again to the past. Because this happened, something similar to this happened in the past. Towards the end of Jesus' life. Yes. Right. Yeah. Let me read it. Isaiah of Ages, chapter 77, in Pilate's judgment hall. It says that the Roman authorities at this time held a prisoner named Barabbas, who was under sentence of death. Under satanic delusions, he claimed that whatever he could obtain by theft and robbery was his own. He had done wonderful things through satanic agencies. He had gained a following among the people and had excited seditions against the Roman government. Under cover of religious enthusiasm, he was a hardened and desperate villain bent on rebellion and cruelty. By giving the people a choice between this man and the innocent Savior, Pilate sought to arouse them to a sense of justice. He hoped to gain their sympathy of Jesus in opposition to the priests and rulers. Yeah. So, turning to the crowd, he said with great earnestness, Whom will ye that I release unto you? Barabbas or Jesus? Which is called Christ. Like the bellowing of wild beasts came the answer of the mob, Release unto us Barabbas. Same principle. If you take Barabbas, this is the kind of person Barabbas is. Barbarian, thief, crook, murderer. You want him instead of Jesus? This is going to happen if you get a king. You're going to take your goodly young men, put them to work, take your daughters, take them to confederacies. This is what you want? People answer the same way. We hear all of that, whatever, give us what we want, right? Yes, sister.
Yes, and and also in that same book where, when they said, give us Barabbas, just as how Israel said, no, give us a king. I heard what you said, but give us our king. And in that same book, Ellen White mentioned that if only the people knew the depth of what they were saying when they said, "You have murdered us," Christ is blood them up and to the children. If they only knew the depth of what they were asking, so too in our days, when they heard about this Sunday law, if they knew what they were really asking for, they would have died at the spot of a heart attack. When they would have seen what is to come upon them as a result of their demand, So,
but it's like a recurring thing. It's just keep recurring. As you have said, and as we all know, nothing is new.
Right.
From Eve in the garden until now, mankind is going farther and farther away from God. Until now, because the weight of saying, "Let his blood be upon us." You want to be Caesar's friend? Well, you better do what we say. Pilate, you want to be Caesar's friend? Do as we say. Because we will not vote for you again if you don't do as we say. And for fear of status, not having the status in this river, he said, "All right, let me wash my hands with water." But the word still remains. The blood of Christ be upon us and our children. Where we who are now holding on to Christ is seeing the effect of this. Many around cannot see it, but it is a dangerous thing for us to party with people who don't love Christ. So, brethren, it is very simple, and as we say, we have to mingle because Jesus mingled with everybody and he bid them to come. So we will try, as we have already established, to have a party with them. When they have their thing, we go and we not inner it, but we inner it. Simple. We attend a function, let's say a funeral or a wedding of a friend who is not a member of the church. There is pork and there is fish and there is chicken and there is vegetable. We partake of what we think is best, the vegetable. And pork there too. How do we excuse ourselves from this? There was a brother who some time ago he said that he went to this function because he's running taxi and they had this function and he went and he took up his dish and so he moved down the line because unclean food was there and all of that, and he is a Christian, Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and he said moved down the line with his dish in his hand and he took nothing. Everywhere he went, nothing, and he moved down the line until his plate was still empty. He moved out of the line and moved away. We have to be very particular, purposeful in our hearts, just like Daniel who decided that no matter what, we will stand.
Yes, Brother Denrol, in the same chapter of 1 Samuel 8, I am thinking that some of that what was said to the Israelites, I don't think they heard it. When you're bent and want to do your own thing, and somebody is trying to counsel you, it's like you just break off stick in your ears, and you don't want to hear it, and so therefore I don't think they heard it. Because in the section here where it said that God, when they get the king, and when they are crying out because of the oppression of the king, God will not hear them. I don't think they heard that. Because when you're going through your situation, who will be there to help you? Only God. And God is saying, I will not hear you. And they're saying, still give us the king. I don't think they heard. Because this is the God who has been there for you. Even, as Shanta mentioned, that even when they were going through their struggle and the war, and they didn't even have to lift a weapon, and God delivered them.
Yeah,
and I'm saying that this God is saying, I will not hear you. And you're still saying, give us the king.
Yeah, but remember, from week one, the trait, remember the trait of Israelites from week one? I think it's the trait. Because remember, say, going out like right after God does a shh, I open up the miracle, open up the Red Sea. As them cross, as them foot cross the river and say, them thirsty. Or was they hungry for the flesh? One of them. I think it's the water.
Yeah, the one.
Them so as they murmur. So in the trait, if you look from week 1, snake bite them up. Snake bite them up. Why?
The acts of queen.
Eat quail to come out of them.
Tired of the manna, they want
They want the manna. I think that is the Israelite trait.
So where did this text come in? Where did this text come in now in this that says Israel is joined to their idols. Let Ephraim is joined to his idol. Leave him alone. The other one said, he will allow them to believe the lie. Send them a strong delusion that they will believe the lie. We have to be looking into all of this. So if we don't shun the very appearance of evil, we will end up in the same path where evil knows.
Alright, we're going to take one.
A short.
We're going to take 2 short ones and then we move on. Sister Shantika.
Okay. I was just saying what you were saying, where it's either they didn't hear or they were very presumptuous. Because many a times, we can see the end result of what we are doing. But yet still we believe that we can do this, and then when trouble comes, we call upon God and say, God, forgive me because I do so and so, I'm in the ear so. But it's the same thing. So it's either they did not hear or they cherish presumption in their
Presumption is that abuse God's grace.
The same presumption is very prevalent today.
Yes.
We know the result of certain things that they are pushing, but yet still we say, give it to us, because if we don't get it, we'll be marginalized. It's the same thing.
Yes. Thank you. Sister Simone.
Yes, I believe they hear, and the reason for the presumption is what Isaiah would have said. Because God is not quick in his judgment. They don't take it for granted and to do this is over. Right? So that was the result. Or that was why they were doing what they were doing.
I believe a text like that in Ecclesiastes too, as well. Alright, so we're moving on now to presumption, a false start in the race of faith. Where you get from that? What do you get from that? Listen to it. It says presumption, a false start in the race of faith. What do you get from that? Anybody?
What the word of God says, what the consequences. We go ahead with what we think is best, and we never mind that if anything goes wrong, then God will fix it. So it's like we move off on presumption and think that it is actually faith we are exercising.
Perfect. Perfect. So you jump the gun. We call it for a race of faith. And if you start ahead of time, that's it's a false start, or false start to start before, right? Presumption. Alright. So do you think it is important, which one do you think is more important, to start a race or to end it?
To end it.
To end it? Yeah, what do you think more important? Or you start the race or you end the race?
Or you end the race.
You end the race?
Yes.
I started the building. I started a little bit to error.
Both are equally important.
Yeah. No. And.
Alright. Alright, so Saul had a good start because his first challenge after he was appointed, he showed his military skill, he was a man of war, very tactical. So he was victorious against the king of the Ammonites. And not only was he successful, but he paid homage to God by ordering feasts of public rejoicing and offered sacrifices to God. That was his first feat. Victory over the Ammonites. And have a feast, thank you God, thank you, give me victory. Alright. However, it was against the Philistines, second war now, that he begins to get ahead of himself and stumble in the race. Presumption start kicking. Self. Alright, so we're going to look at how the two occasions of Saul's presumptuousness paved the way for his downfall. And the first occasion is in 1 Samuel 10. Somebody read it from please. 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 8.
And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal. Behold, I will come down unto thee to offer burnt offering, and to sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days shalt thou tarry till I come to thee, and show thee what thou shalt do. And it was so that when he had turned his back to go from Samuel, God gave him another heart. And all those signs came to pass that day. And when they came thither to the hill, behold, a company of prophets met him in the Spirit of God, came upon him.
Just verse 8, you know. Just verse 8.
Mm-hmm.
Alright. So it was verse 10. If you go to chapter 13, we see that Saul found himself in a tight spot against the Philistines. So he rushes ahead of God's prophet, because we just read that God, Samuel told himself he could go to Gilgal, tarry there until I come. Alright? So he found himself in a tight spot, and the Philistines were large number. And he rushes ahead of God's prophet in the name of presumption. That's what made presumption such a dangerous sin, because Saul thought he was doing a good thing. What did he do? Let us read, verse 8 to 12. Chapter 13, 8 to 12. Read that for me.
And he tarried 7 days, according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, Bring hither a burnt offering to me, and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, What hast thou done? And Saul said, Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered themselves together at Michmash.
Alright. So was it his responsibility to do priestly duty? No. So it was presumptuous of him to think that he could go ahead and perform that duty without the relevant authority. That is just like in the days of Moses. It's the same thing like having a commoner do the duties of a Levite. You know, so the Levite alone, the whole tribe, Levites supposed to be priests. Like any other regular commoner Israelites do that. It's the same thing. Alright. So do we see any other example of this kind of presumptuousness today? I have one from mine. Let me say my own first. I think it's the Catholic practice it when you go in the box and you confess. It's presumptuous to think that you have that. I think some of them think that they're doing a good thing, doing something righteous. But do you think it's presumptuous for them to assume that God will have them do that?
Yes.
I think it's presumptuous.
The Bible said nobody call no man father. And no one can forgive sins except Jesus in heaven. It says very presumptuous for them to assume that role.
So that's why they don't have the license to forgive sins.
Yeah.
Only Jesus have the license.
Someone who is sinless, so they can't do that.
Can we think of any more presumptuousness in the
Yes,
church?
when we go ahead and we ordain women to be pastors, we reap the fruit.
Oh yes. Can we think that once again they think that they're doing something good?
Yeah, we run ahead. We go. We were sent to do these things. So they do them of their own intellectual, ideas that we need to keep up with the times. Other denominations are doing it. We don't want to be too straight laced or too peculiar. So we want to merge. And when we do that, all these things come in the church. That is presumptuous of us.
How would we term this situation here where say we have this school nearby us here that persons are trained to become ministers or pastors, and here you have a man from another denomination comes to be trained as well, not a member of the church, still a member of their church, trained in your institution to go back in their church to teach. How do we look at that?
It's a business. They're operating as a business. A profit only, but not for.
And then we boast about it that we have graduated or we have just sent out our first Sunday minister from our institution.
And the presumptuous element to believe that God is right to that. The presumptuousness in that would be to believe that God is right to that. Right?
Right. Yeah. Yes, but you see, all that came about because they wanted accreditation from the government.
Right.
So when you apply to government for all kind of secular stuff, then you have to lower your standard and you have to take in whoever they say you have to take in. So that's what happens when we lower our standards.
So it's not a
So
Christian.
then
So it's no longer a Christian institution.
Exactly.
It's just a business.
So then it would come in just as when God told Samuel, tell the people that these are the things, these are the burdens that they will bear. Here they are, your sons will be traumatized, your women will be slaves, your men servant, your field will be given to whatever. And we still say yes.
Exactly. Because we want to be like the heathen, we want to be like, they wanted to be like people around them. It's among the nations that are around them.
Even as it comes to us spreading the message, and you have many persons that I've spoken to, and another thing that I hear a lot is that you have to stay in the buildings to teach those who are just coming into the faith. You can't leave to go in independent ministries or many persons call themselves supporting ministries. You can't leave to go in those yet. It's not the time for it because you have to stay in the buildings and to teach these people, and even when you show from the council where it is said on more than one occasion that you do not sit in darkness because of the effect that it will have on you, where the light around you slowly grows dim and you are left in utter darkness. So the buffet is not the enemy. And they say, well, yes, but God will protect us because we are doing His work. It's the height of presumption as we come down in these last week, and the point where many will be because until Christ comes, people will be in the buildings who are not seeking truth. And when you make it your point of view to stay in there in the name of teaching them, the light around you slowly becomes your left in utter darkness.
Right, I had something like that. Alright, so Patriarchs and Prophets, chapter 60, let us know the reason why there's a little terror between Samuel reaching to Saul. It says that the time for the proving of Saul had come. He was now to show whether or not he would depend on God and patiently wait according to His command, thus revealing himself as one whom God could trust in trying places as the ruler of His people, or whether he would be vacillating and unworthy of the sacred responsibility that had devolved upon him. Would the king whom Israel had chosen listen to the ruler of all kings? Would he turn the attention of his faint-hearted soldiers to the one in whom is everlasting strength and deliverance? No, he didn't. So he failed that test that God gave him. And how much of us here today get up and just do things and think that God is with you? Do we do that practice? Just get up and say, we're going to do God's work, and just get up and just assume that God will be there with us? Anybody guilty? No, just introspect. Introspect for a minute and think about it. You remember Uzzah? Uzzah? Do you remember Uzzah?
Yeah.
That is the ultimate, that's the prime example of same time consequence of presumptuous. What happened to Uzzah?
Then was trying to catch the heart.
Right. You think he was doing something good?
He was told not.
He was told not to, but he thought of his own
Yes.
reasoning, he thought he was doing something good. What happened to him? What happened to him?
Right.
At same time.
We have present itself to do good evil.
And the license of fire on the
Same thing.
No, they were different. I think they knew they were lying.
Alright, so did you know that even being confident of future plans is being presumptuous? We know that.
Yes.
Right?
Still not will.
Right, so it says, if God, read James 4, chapter 14, 13 to 15. James chapter 4, verses 13 to 15. Yes, verses 13 to 15.
Whereas we know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanished away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live, and do this or that.
Everybody hear that? Alright, thank you, Sister Smith. Somebody outside read that again for me, please. James 4, 13 to 15. James 4. 13 to 15.
You did hear.
Yeah, no, I'm asking somebody outside to.
Oh, fine.
Yeah, for everybody purposes. Or you can come
Go
outside.
to know, ye that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city. 30 to 15?
Yes.
Okay. Go into such a city and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain, whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall, and do this or that.
So we say goodbye to each other and say, see you tomorrow or later. We putting ourselves in the place of God, thinking that we have tomorrow. And the scripture says, a spirit of prophecy should always add, if it is God's will or God's will, always say if it is the will of God. To avoid being presumptuous. Even something simple like that, right? Alright. So the first occasion was assuming priestly duties. Let's look at the second one now in 1 Samuel 15 verse 3. Samuel gave him a clear instruction. 15 verse 3.
And go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camels and ass.
And does that instruction sound clear to you?
Yes.
Yes. Could it be any clearer? No.
Utterly.
Yeah?
See, utterly destroy.
Yeah, he said utterly. So no space in there to have any independent thought. He said utterly destroy everything. Alright, let's see how Saul still managed to presume that his idea would be more pleasing to God. In verse 7 to 9. Somebody read 7 to 9.
And Saul smote the Amalekites from Havilah until thou comest to Shur, that is over against Egypt. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the fatlings and the lamb, and all that was good. and would not utterly destroy them, but everything that was vile and refused, and they destroyed utterly.
Alright, thank you.
That's it.
Somebody else read 12 to 15 for me, someone else. Same chapter.
And when Samuel rose early to meet Saul in the morning, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set him up a place, and is gone about, and passed on, and gone down to Gilgal. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said unto him, Blessed be thou of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. And Samuel said, What meaneth then this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? And Saul said, They have brought them from the Amalekites. For the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed.
Alright, so verse 13. That verse shows us why presumption is such a dangerous sin. Remember the first, when we just started, said that a thin line. Let's see it again. The sin of presumption lies close beside the virtue of perfect faith. So who can tell me why presumption, from verse 30, who can tell me why presumption is so dangerous? It says that, Blessed be thou, the Lord, I perform the commandment of the Lord. It's because what? He thought was doing so. Right. If you think you're doing something for God, and it is very hard to convince you otherwise that what you're doing is not really for God.
Because just like Saul, when he was persecuting the Christians, he did it with his whole heart because he thought that what he was doing it for God.
Right. You heard how he greeted Saul? Blessed art thou. He was in good mood. He feel like he accomplished something. I have performed
the commandments of
the
Lord.
He run out and hug him and say, Blessed art thou. Blessed be thou, the Lord. I perform the commandment of God, of the Lord. Smiling, right?
Yes.
Not knowing that he did the complete opposite. That's why presumption is so dangerous.
This is what God said.
God, your own standard.
Yes, God said utterly destroy
Everything.
everything.
And you are going to
listed them
save
so
soul.
to give sacrifice to the Lord.
And you know, in John 16, verse 2, when it said, anybody know John 16, verse 2? Alright, let's read it. You don't have to go there, I read it. It says, when they say they'll put you out of the synagogue and kill you, thinking that they do God a service, it becomes like the people, them presumptuous as well. Because they're assuming that this is what God wants, not it? When they put you out of the synagogue and run it down and capture you and kill you, them saying to themselves we're doing God a service, but they're not really doing God a service.
That's Cain.
That's what?
Cain.
Yes. Oh, with this ex sacrifice, giving his best, but that's what they asked for. That's a good example. Cain and Abel. Alright.
Anyway,
Yes,
verse 9 says, But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, etc. Right?
Right.
But in verse 15, he's reporting to Samuel and he says, and Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites. So he totally, disassociates himself from the blatant disobedience when it was pointed out to him. Yeah.
But at the first, he probably read Samuel, or Lemina, and come to him and say, hey, I did this. And Sam said, you done foolishly, and said, that was them.
Right. You pass the blame. It's not me, it's them. It's not me, it's the board. It's not me, but you are utterly in charge. So you have to stand like the brave. And you have to be unpopular with certain decisions because it's coming from thus said the Lord. And that's the difference between the king and the prophet. The prophet do the bidding of God, but the king works on his own. He is a more go, right? But the prophet is a more send. Because he listens and he tells.
So, Oh.
Remember that it was the same dilemma that Aaron found himself in when he saw the anger on Moses' face and he
Yes.
spoken word.
Yeah.
He said, man, they took off their ring and I threw it in the fire and the calf came
Come
out.
out.
Just like that, and miracles is that he actually spent time to chisel and to carve out,
Yeah.
this calf. So because he saw the fury of Moses, he passed the blame to the Israelites that they gave him and put it in the fire and the calf came out.
And Adam did the same thing with Eve.
The first definition for presumption is an idea that is taken to be true on the basis of probability. You think that definition fits what is the first occasion again? What is solid first again? Not kill everybody. What is solid first again?
The first time
He did the priestly duty. Do you think that was do you think that occasion fits the first definition?
yes, because he thought that Saul would not come. He thought that
Hold on. Let me read through the definitions first, and then they tell me which occasion fits each definition. So the first definition of presumption is an idea that is taken to be true on the basis of probability. The second definition is behavior perceived as arrogant, disrespectful, and transgressing the limits of what is permitted or appropriate.
that's the first one.
The second definition fits the first one, don't it? Okay, I said you transgress the limit of what is permitted or appropriate. So it wasn't appropriate for him to the priestly duty, so he passed the limit. And the first one says an idea that is taken to be true on the basis of probability. So he thought that
Samuel would not
right. I probably thought that because them sheep were without blemish, them perfect for sacrifice, so God would accept it. Right? So those two definitions fits each of the occasions. Alright. So after both occasions, first and second occasion, both God and Samuel has had enough. God tells Samuel that he repented that he appointed Saul as king. I know that there are only a few occasions where God repents, It have to be serious thing that God's repent with. One of the major instances where God said repent was for making man. That one. Yeah. To Abel said repent and make man. So that shows the degree of how God was displeased with Saul. And Samuel was also upset, of course, and he expressed his dissatisfaction with Saul and let him have an earful. But in that earful, he left a gem of reproof and instruction in righteousness, like Joshua did for us last week. Because from Joshua, we got the gem from last week was, you could see an evil unto you to serve the Lord. But as for me and my house, I will serve. That was the gem for last week. The gem we get out of this earful is in 1 Samuel 15, verse 22. Somebody read that for me, please.
And Samuel said, "Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams."
Amen. So that is this week's gem. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Alright, so wrapping up now, Samuel relays God's final judgment in verse 23, which says, "For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as in iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected thee from being king." So, brethren, what we learned this week, so to reprove us and to correct us, and for us to do some introspection for those who are presumptuous. But you have to do some deep introspection, because remember it's a thin line between presumption and faith. Alright, so next week.
This word is for me.
You're okay.
Yes, Brother Denrol, because even as the community my point, even with the organization now, it's they feel that they are doing the right thing by saying to the brethren that these people who are in present do not listen to them, do not give an ear to them. Right? So they feel that they are doing good for the people, for the members of the church, by telling their members not to listen to present truth. Because. So that is also a presumption, because they feel that they are doing God a favor.
They think they're stopping the spreading of heresy. Alright, so next week we look at part 2, titled From Striving to Striving. From Striving to Striving. As we continue to look at Paul and the impact that this news that his kingdom will be withdrawn from him. Let us pray.